It's a beautiful but a rainy day here at Summer's Best 2 Weeks Citikidz. It's the end of fifth session, and I spent the better part of the day enjoying some time with my oldest brother. And so, if you don't know, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My oldest brother is a pastor in the D.C. area at United Baptist Church, and I had the pleasure of sitting with him. He's a Kaleo this session here at our camp, and so the interview revealed to him some things about me that maybe you don't know, and so I figured I'd take the opportunity to give you a chance to learn them. So enjoy the next 48 minutes of an interview.
So these questions came from one of Gary, I think it's Gary Chapman, talk about relationships and family. So I ran across it and I got these, and I already asked Mom these questions. I went through these questions. I want to hear your answers to these questions.
Sweet.
All right, here we go. Number 1, how would you rate your childhood growing up on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 equals amazing. 1 equals terrible.
5.5.
Why did you give it that score?
5.5 because as a child, I thought everything that I went through was kind of like my kids now. Really annoying. Leadership was always thrust on me. I didn't want it. I did not feel loved or cared for or appreciated or any of that stuff the way that I saw it in other kids. But now I'm like, I have no clue how I would do what I do today without the upbringing that I have. So, even that 4.5 that I did not give it is more based upon what I selfishly missed out on than it is what I had.
Okay. Follow-up question here is, what specific things stand out to you as you look back?
The number one thing is what I literally had the conversation. Yes, leadership thrust upon me constantly. I just don't remember a time in life where I was not held to the absolute highest standard. At school, at church, at home, when I finally got a job, like it was always based upon my dad, my siblings, being the youngest of 5. It was always, the expectation was always laid on me to be the best or to do the most, to have the best grades, to be the greatest leader, Yeah,
I understand. I see that. All right, question number 2. Believe it or not, that's question number 1. So every question is similar. You know Gary Chapman. All right, so what are 2 negative habits you saw in your family growing up?
Oh, the number 1 and number 2 was workaholism, and due to that, negativity. And I shouldn't even say negativity. I should say workaholism and criticism.
Yeah.
That would be the 2.
Yeah, I know I said critical.
Yeah.
I said the family was real critical.
Yeah.
Follow-up is, how do you think these habits have impacted you as an adult?
They have helped shape my work ethic to where I love hard work. It shows up in my workouts. It shows up in the way I train staff. It shows up in my leadership style. It shows up in everything that I do. But it also, like my mental state was trying to counteract all of the negative. But in doing so, I threw the baby out with the bathwater. So then it was like, well, don't criticize anybody. Don't say anything about anything. But it was so built into me. When I thought I was encouraging somebody, they still saw it as criticism. So I was like, well, what? Like, I'm trying to tell you did a good job, and somehow you're still hearing that you did a bad job. I'm trying to figure that out. And what I recognized is that's why I first used the word negative, because I tended and still tend at times to focus on what somebody did not do to praise them versus what they did do. So I'll say something like, man, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. Man, you did a great job. Versus, hey, you did this, and I really appreciate that. So yeah, that it has shaped my leadership, which is probably the thing that sticks out most in my mind. It shapes my parenting. It shapes everything. Work ethic, and leadership primarily.
So here's a question I have based on your response. So how do you balance the workaholism that you experienced and saw in your background versus everything you've learned today? How do you create balance and margin?
You know what? Margin is a better word. I don't create balance. And I tell people all the time, as I grow as a Christian and talk to my mentors, balance is a word that I think is a misnomer. I love the word tension, right? Like in order for, I can't remember who it was that came up with the example, but he was talking about how you balance things that are on opposite ends, like weights.
Mm-hmm.
Like ultimately, what looks like balance, it really just is tension. It's holding two things in tension. And so I often, with my schedule, with my time, and let me define those two so that it makes sense. So the reason that the mentors that I've talked to have said balance is not going to be really possible is because it's defined as giving equilibrium. Like there's no way you can give equal time to your job and equal time to your family in a day. That's just not possible. But you can hold them both in tension. So the question is, if you've got to be at work from 9 to 5, just by sheer math, you can't spend as much time at home as you did at work and sleep.
Right, gotcha.
And so how do you hold that in tension? The amount of energy that you give at work, you have to make sure, if there's balance, right, it's just semantics, that you give that same amount of energy at home. You can't spend all of your energy at work and then not give it at home, and vice versa. So how I hold those two in tension is, I don't think I've found a formula, but what I've learned is, if I don't take care of me, I can't take care of anybody else. So if I don't do self-care, if I don't create margin, if I don't learn to say no, which now I say no to just about everything.
So let me ask you this follow-up to that response is, so if you're creating equilibrium between your job and your family, where do you find time to work on you?
Or I don't create equilibrium.
Do you equate family with the same as working on you?
No, sir.
Okay.
I don't. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't create equilibrium. So when I wake up in the morning, my schedule is the same every day, whether off season or camp, pretty much. Every day at 6 a.m., I'm going to be in the gym, and it's going to be a 30-minute workout, and it's going to work on absolutely everything I need to work on, where I can pay attention to my self-talk, I can pay attention to how I pray, I can pay attention to how I think. The next thing I'm going to do, camp makes it a little bit tricky to do this because we have a meeting at 7:30, but the next thing I'm going to do is get in the Word. Like, that's going to be the next place that I go to recenter myself, having heard my self-talk, having watched what I think about. Like, if I'm in the gym and I'm thinking about conversations that I need to have with staff, or I'm thinking about camp, I'm not thinking about the workout at all. It's a clear indication I'm likely doing that in life, where I might have camp in front of me, but I'm thinking about something over here. And so what I keep reminding myself of, and you'll hear us say it down here, live in the moment. Like, just live in the moment. And what God has done with Judah has made me go, I'm not trying to, I used to, and I still am such a visionary. I want to think through 5 years, 10 years down the road. But right now, my mentor EJ and I use this term all the time, just put one foot right in front of the other. And I'm learning I'm learning to, what people call balance, that I call tension. I'm learning to hold everything in tension by just putting one foot right in front of the other. Like right now, just be in this conversation. Don't think about awards. Don't think about what else needs to happen. Just think about this conversation.
Okay. All right. If you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be and why?
It's a great question. And that one's a hard one for me because I think the way that I was raised helped me become who I am now. And I really, really love the way that the Lord made me. But like, if
are they the same? The way the Lord made you and the way you raised?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The yes part of it is, without what I experienced growing up, I would have never had a reason to be who I am today.
Okay.
But because of what I experienced growing up, it turned me into it just formed me into who I am today. And so, if I could qualify the question, if somebody said, if you could be the same exact person you are right now, what would you change? Oh man, I'd have my parents way more involved. I'd have them come to my track meets. I'd have my dad be way more affectionate and compassionate. I would have way more intent with people in general. Like, I feel like the reason, like, so much expectation was placed upon me without vision. So it was just, you're a leader. Okay, what does that mean? Where am I going to lead? How am I going to lead? Nobody really communicated those things. I dreamt a lot, and so people kind of were like, get your head out of the clouds. You know what I mean? Versus, well, let's build internet. The people I can think that build internet, to this day, every single year, I communicate to my staff how influential those people are. So my third grade teacher, Kathy Hodges, will never forget her. Have sought to find her. Every time I find her, I send her an email. One never bounces back. I mean, it always bounces back, but like she instead of get me in trouble of saying you a hard-headed child, said you are so creative. because I was crawling around desk playing Ninja Turtles in her classroom and got 3 or 4 other kids to do it. And so instead of her saying, instead of her reprimanding me, which I was wrong, but instead of her doing that, she was like, "You're so creative, and I hope you see your leadership. Like, you got all of these kids to do that. Wow. That's just not what we can do during reading time. Like, we need y'all on the right. But it helped me understand something. I wasn't wrong. Like, something wasn't wrong with me in wanting to play in that way. It was just more. Yeah. And I see that same thing in Simeon, and I need to encourage his creativity, which I seek to do, without reprimanding it to the point where he's like, something's wrong with me because I think in all these creative ways.
Okay, so some of the things you mentioned in your response, like parents being way more involved, being way more compassionate, the why. So the question was, if you could change anything, what would it be, and why? So what's the why?
I would make my parents more compassionate because I was compassionate and sensitive and tender-hearted, and I felt very much like everybody else in my family was really hard and stoic and almost like extreme in everything. And so, you know, I really did feel like something was wrong with me as a child because I just wanted to chill. Like, I just wanted to play video games. I didn't like being around a lot of people. And we always were around a lot of people. So if my parents were more compassionate, they would have seen that I was an introvert and not forced and thrust me to the forefront all the time. Now I'm glad that happened because I'm constantly in the forefront of hundreds, if not thousands of people. But, and I know, and I don't just implode every time. Whereas for years as a child, man, I hated it. And they just kept putting me up front. Partially because, again, I was just a tender kid. So, like, I was just trying to be pleasing. So if they say, "Oh, nobody else will read scripture this morning," you read scripture. Yes, sir. And I go read scripture, even though I hated being in front of everybody. But what they read that as is he enjoys doing this, or he don't mind. So then they just abuse is the wrong word, but like used it more often to the point where I did not feel like I had a choice in whether or not I could say no. And so that messed me up for years until I learned, oh, you do have the right to say no.
All right, next question. How do your parents and family members express their love and acceptance for you?
That's a great question. I don't know how they do from their perspective. I know how I have received it from my perspective. For me, it has been because we grew up in like workaholism and criticism. Ultimately, the way that I receive love most from my family is if they're not criticizing something. Like at that point, I know I'm doing a good job because they ain't had nothing to criticize. Wow. So that's one way. And then the other way is because of the way God built me, quality time and physical touch. So anytime somebody hugs me, that communicates a whole lot more level of care. Anytime somebody spends time with me and we're talking about what God is doing, that communicates a level of care. But that's just from my perspective. But so yeah, from other people in my family's perspective, I'm not sure how they would say, "Hey, I've done this to communicate my level of care for you." Whereas the emails that people have sent me, the texts that people have sent me that communicate their level of care, communicate to me. Spending time with me has communicated that. Touch has communicated that. We had a conversation in 2010 on the bridge at Camp Souls that communicated a level of care. And that conversation still rings in my head. Titus and I had a conversation in the hospital that continues to ring in my head. So, and Sean Sean and Cher have always been a huge encouragement to me because I felt like they always tried to vicariously live through me in the sense of the scriptures, where Sean just was constantly communicating the scriptures, constantly communicating to me the stuff that he was learning, constantly pushing me to know what 70 AD and 587 BC meant when I was like 11. So all of those things, I tell him all the time, I would not be who I am today without him. Your level of care, you know, I wouldn't be doing this without seeing you. You were the first missionary I saw. And again, when I say that, did I see other missionaries? Sure. As a pastor's kid, I'm sure other missionaries came through. But the first living, breathing missionary that I saw actually leave somewhere, go somewhere else that I knew he wasn't from that place was you going to Triple C Bible Camp. And so I followed in her footsteps. And then, of course, that led me to Kids Across America, or it led me to Summer's Best, Kids Across America, and now here. So, yeah, that's, and then hearing people say how the Lord has, what the Lord is doing in them or people around them based upon what he's doing in me, all of that to me is like the grand thumbs up.
Wow. Okay, has anyone in your family been verbally, physically, or sexually abusive to you or to other family members?
I don't think the answer is yes, but I think that's just because of my idea of abuse. I think other people might consider, those classic stories of getting yelled at as verbal abuse. I don't consider it as verbal abuse because the intent was not to harm. There was no grooming process. There was not, like, it wasn't, hey, let me build rapport with you so that I can then take you for all you worth or get something out of you that I haven't communicated to you that I want out of you. So I wouldn't say I've been abused in any way. Okay. And that's why I said the thing with me saying yes to stuff. I don't think people abuse that power. I just think they never thought he may not be comfortable with this. Let me see if he's comfortable with it. Right. So, like, again, some of it is my clinical thought of there was no grooming. There was no, hey, let me earn your trust so that I can break it type thing. It was just more.
Right. Which probably is understanding what abuse is.
Yeah.
When you have not granted access.
Correct.
Yeah. That's right. All right, so I'm going to finish this question just so you can hear what it says. So it says, has anyone set boundaries with this person or have they ignored it hoping it will go away? So the reason I wanted to say that question, even though you said you couldn't say yes to the question, is I still think when that has happened in our lives, well, let me ask you this way. Yeah. Did you begin to set boundaries?
I have now.
Yeah.
I started setting boundaries in.
Let me ask you. And do you think people around you, family is what we're talking about, have ignored possible abuse or something like that, hoping it will go away?
I don't think anybody's ignored abuse. Okay. I think people have not understood my boundaries. And I started setting boundaries in 2004, 2005. And then again in 2011, 2004 to 2005 was when I went out to Missouri, learned just a whole lot about codependent relationships, attachment research, all of that stuff. And then saw that counselor in 2011 that helped me process through what can you change, what can you control, what's yours to own. And so I started setting boundaries because I knew if I didn't, the lines of who I was would continue to blur. I wouldn't know where I stopped and where my family began and vice versa. And so the boundaries I started to set in even 2004, 2005 were, I need to establish who I am in and of myself because I didn't know who I was in and of myself. I knew who I was as a pastor's kid. I knew who I was as Everett's brother. I knew who I was as Titus's brother. I all of those things. But I needed to, just as in any mentor-protege relationship, in the words of the comic books, establish my own city. Like I had to go and be Nightwing, not Robin. You know what I mean? Like I needed to go and have a life of my own where I really understood, no, this is what I'm called to. This is what I'm committed to. And then I can reach forward, backward, side to side, whatever, and help. Because I had learned enough face to face, but I hadn't experienced enough side by side. You know what I mean? I should say it different. I had been taught enough face to face. I hadn't learned enough side by side. And so,
I understand that. And then you became the person up front.
Correct. Which I did the Obi-Wan thing. Like legit, I thought, okay, so to become that, I need to start teaching. Versus to become that, I need to start using these tools that I've been given. And so, just like Obi-Wan, I started teaching before I was ready to teach, but I didn't know I wasn't ready to teach until I'd already failed somebody. And so now, like I said before, the analogy I use is my upbringing gave me all kind of tools and weapons and knowledge that, in my opinion, is still in my mental tool shed. And I've learned how to use some of them really, really well, and that's my go-to. But I still got tools in the shed that I've never used.
I remember you said that. One thing you said. So how did the writing of Identity Crisis and what you just responded to, where was that in the process, and how did that help you?
Yeah,
as to where you are now.
That was before. That was That was before I understood what I was even doing. That was because of an encounter in 2000, when I was 19, freshman in college, was playing basketball. Never forget this moment. Shared the gospel with Paul Stoddard on the basketball court during practice. Gave him a gospel track, and he fell on his knees and said, "God help me, I'm a sinner." And he threw the track on the ground and started laughing in my face. And I remember going to my room that night, and I cried out to God and was like, "What am I doing? Like, what are we doing here?" And it was at a time when my grades had fallen, and the athletic director and the coach still wanted me to stay on the team. But I was like, dude, like, I got a D right now in criminology. I shouldn't be taking this course. And so if I don't take this course, if I take this course, I mean, it's going to hurt me even more academically. So the long and short of it was, at that time, God revealed to me that I wasn't doing, like, I was doing basketball for my dad, because I thought it was a connection we had, because he came to every single game. And so then when I let go of basketball, ministry became the next connection. And so, you know, that was my freshman year. So by my senior year, when I was writing Identity Crisis, it was a part of my thesis, but it was after so much turmoil in my life that I had thought, man, how does this work? Like, how does God work?
You ever go back and reread it?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
You read?
Have made changes.
I was going to say,
yeah,
revising it. You
yeah,
publish it?
Have not published it yet. Haven't talked to anybody.
Are you going to?
I don't know.
Okay.
But reference it all the time in curriculum and everything, because it was the foundation of me being who I was. And it was perfect because right after that happened, right after I wrote that as my thesis my senior year, I came here and then went to KA, where I learned all of these things about attachment research and unhealthy coping mechanisms and maladaptive behaviors and why they persist and triggers and all of these things. And I was like, yo, I got all that. And that's how I have you heard my orange analogy?
Yeah.
Like,
you
that's,
told me that one. Yeah.
That's how I came up with the orange analogy.
Down here, somewhere.
Yeah, right at the climate wall thing.
Yeah.
And that's how I came up with that analogy, because it was like, that's what it is for me. Oranges aren't bad, but they might be bad for me, and that's why I have to. That's why I have to create margin, and so and boundaries. So anyway, all of that said, it was right before like God prepped that fallow ground so that I was able to receive. Oh man, I do have codependent relationships with my family members, particularly my mom. This is where it came from. This is how that happened. This is how those seeds persist. This is where I haven't created margin or boundary, and this is why. This is where I have not been able to attach to people. I'm a great connector, but I can't do community. I can't be vulnerable. I can't tell people where I'm really hurt. This is why I connect to Batman and Spider-Man. This is why I connect to the Hulk and Nightcrawler. This is why all of these things matter to me. But if that foundation wouldn't have been laid in 2004, that stuff that came in 2005 wouldn't have made any sense. And then marriage and family just continues to unravel that puzzle.
Do any of your family members manipulate or make you feel guilty?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
If so, do you allow it?
Great question. Now, instead of me saying I allow it, I would say I combat it. So because of the nature of the codependent relationship, I know that my trigger will always be wanting to reach out to my family and help. So when somebody asks me if I'll do something that has to do with my family, my natural response is yes, no matter what, yes. I don't say that out loud, but that's what's happening internally. What I've had to do is create some space. So my natural response is, no, that's a great question. Let me talk to my wife and let's think through it. Because I really do. I need another person to process with. And if Kendra says yes, now I'm still left with the decision. But if she says no, it gives me the out to be able to say no. The best way for me to take care of my family and myself is to make this decision. So have I allowed it? Yes, I'm sure I have. I can't think of one particular instance at this point. But at the same time, I would say not without thinking it through thoroughly and saying, I'm not being manipulated at this point. I'm choosing to do something that ultimately is best for the nature of the relationship. And so last night we had a big conversation about, I shouldn't say big, but we had a conversation about Labor Day. And so campaign's the 11th, and I went through my schedule from the 18th, preaching 2 services, going to Nashville, all these other things. And then I come back, go to the staff retreat for 3 days, and that next day likely is Labor Day weekend. And so I was able to say to Mom and Kendra, hey, I'm not doing anything for that weekend. Like, everybody can come up. Just know I'm not cooking. I'm not doing anything.
Right.
So y'all got to set all of that up
Right.
without me.
Right.
And real talk, likely I still will if I feel up to it. But I needed to be able to create that margin of space to say I'm not doing anything. But if I can say that now, I can always be more willing to do something later.
Oh, yeah.
So I need to communicate now. Look, I'm going to be exhausted. And so I don't think it's fair to anybody to have to put up with my attitude because I said yes and I know I'm going to be exhausted. So, again, we still said yes to the weekend happening, which I think is the right decision. I've just also been able to communicate, this is where I'm going to be mentally and emotionally. This is the space that I'm going to be in. So I want this to happen in regard to me. If that doesn't happen, then again, I'm able now to have those conversations with some level of, you can just blow it off, man.
Yeah.
With some level of humility and transparency and vulnerability, whereas for years I couldn't, because I didn't feel like people would listen. I felt like instead people would go, why can't you just love God and do it? It's like, well, I do love God, but if I ain't healthy, does that matter?
Right.
I can also hate God and do it, right? But if doing it is the focus, then I'm still in a poor position.
I thought it was where I went out, but I think you answered it. Next question is, when a family member says or does something that hurts your feelings, do they give a sincere apology and try to make things better?
Depends on the person. And I would say for the most part, yes, within one of the 5 apology languages. So some people just try to make it up by doing other stuff to communicate that they're sorry. And again, for years I didn't understand that, and now I do. Some people, very, very rarely will somebody say, hey, what I did was wrong. I should not have done that. Here's what I should have done. How can I make that up to you? And walk through all 5. And I'm not saying people have to, as much as I'm saying. I think everybody apologizes in a different way that does fit within the 5 love languages.
Do they, when your family's hurt you, do you let them know?
If
they've hurt your feelings, do they
now
always know?
Oh, yeah, now, absolutely. 9 times out of 10, oh, yeah.
So that means I haven't hurt your feelings?
Not recently, no.
Okay. If there's some way I hurt your feelings in the past?
Yeah, but we talked about it.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, that was hospital. We talked about it in hospital.
Yeah. I just want to make sure.
Since then, no.
Okay.
We talked about the passive aggressive thing. So that's what I'm saying. Like, in my emotional health and growing, like, I just said, it don't help you if I don't tell you. And all this Christian stuff that we talk about, like, if I can't do it with my own family, regardless of where they are emotionally, like, I still got to do it for me. And so every time I'm hurt now, I go have that conversation. And that's most people in my life. There's one conversation that is outstanding currently that I need to have. I'm just waiting on the right time, but it's not with my family. It's with somebody that can't, but just waiting on the right time to have it.
Do any of your family members criticize you and make snarky or sarcastic comments either to your face or behind your back?
Behind my back, I wouldn't know because I'm not there. But to my face, my mom does, my dad does.
Really?
Yeah, but they don't see them as snarky because they do it all the time.
No, that's true. I mean, I get that. That's
true.
Yeah, that's just true.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. If so, what steps have you taken to make sure that does not continue?
I can't control it not continuing. What I've done is communicated at the times that it's inappropriate. And so even here, this session, I have several times looked at my mom and said, hey, this is not appropriate. Or that's not the way I would like my kids to dress or whatever. I've done the same thing to dad. Just, hey man, just think about what you're saying. And I don't know if that's helpful. But trying to do it in a very respectful way.
Oh, absolutely.
But also in a, hey, that's not acceptable kind of way.
All right, we're almost done. When thinking of the family member who shows the most unhealthy behaviors, do you think that this person has the capacity and emotional intelligence to change their behavior?
Currently, no.
Okay. Are you thinking to share or?
No, share. I put in a whole different category because
Okay.
I don't know what's happening with her.
Okay.
But transparently sharing with where dad and mom are, I don't think that they have the capacity to have the capacity to exhibit the emotional intelligence that is required of them to be in the positions that they're in, grandparent, parent, leaders in the community. Dot 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 dot.
So you know the follow was why not? So why?
I think it's because they haven't dealt with their own triggers, attachment issues, abandonment, codependence. I don't think that they have. You know what? My friend and Chris and I said everybody needs to have an objective person sort through their dirty laundry and tell them what doesn't fit anymore that they're still wearing.
Good analogy.
Tell them what needs to be washed.
I get it.
Because you know how we do, right? We wear a shirt and we go, man, I just wore that for an hour.
Yeah.
So I need to put that back up in the thing.
Yeah.
But when you're used to your own smell, you don't know that the shirt smells. So you need some objective authority to go, yo, you need to wash that.
Yeah.
Oh, that don't fit no more. Oh, that. And so I don't. Just based upon the conversations that I have with them and seeing people who are in that emotionally intelligent state and growing in their emotional intelligence and want to grow in their emotional intelligence. I shouldn't say that they don't have the capacity. What I should say is I do not see them seeking to expand upon that capacity. It seems more that it's like, yo, this is just where I am.
But do you see where they're, I agree with you 100%. Do you see where they are trying, but not succeeding?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like they're trying, but they really don't have, I don't want to say don't have the capacity, but they need more instructions into what the capacity looks like. Like,
correct.
What does that capacity actually look? What happens inside of us that allows that capacity to occur?
Right.
There are some things that, and you mentioned it, like we have to deal with our baggage. We got to deal with whatever that thing. But I think we can help them. I think I can help them. I think you can help them. I think Titus can help them. I think us three can. I think Sean. I think all of us can help them because we are all trying to make more sense of our story.
Yeah.
And as I try to make more sense of my story, I need them.
Agreed.
That's what I found out. So I go back and that's why I asked Dad the question this week.
Yeah.
Have you ever quit anything?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at my life. I'm like, I've never quit anything. I've been fired.
Right.
I've never quit anything. So I'm just like, where did I get that from? Like, I must have got it from him. So I asked him and he says, yeah, I quit something. I'm like, wow. You know? So anyway, all right. I think this is the last question. Yep, it is. Have you been minimizing, avoiding, or making excuses for any of your family members' unhealthy behavior? Have you been?
Definitely not minimizing.
Okay.
Definitely not avoiding, probably to a fault.
Okay.
What was the last one?
Or making excuses.
Making excuses, definitely not.
For any of your family members' unhealthy behavior.
I would not say making excuses. I would say seeking to understand.
Okay.
And so when you say, hey, I think we can help them, one of my mentors, Rick Warlock, says, Timotheus, there are two assumptions anytime you're trying to help somebody. That if you make either one of them before actually having an answer, you're making a mistake. Assumption number one is that as a teacher and a student relationship, as a student, you want to learn.
Yeah. So that's
right?
first one. Like, do they want to learn?
So do you want to learn?
Right.
If you don't want to learn,
right,
I might as well be talking to the wall because I've made the assumption you want to learn, which is why I'm teaching. If you don't want to learn, we're in trouble. So even if you want to learn, I still have to assume that you want to do the hard work in order to learn. So I can say everything I want. I can teach you face to face. But until you're willing to learn side by side, until you're willing to go through what we call the EPT, early pregnancy test, is everywhere else it is, but it's experience, practice, and trial. Unless you're willing to go to those hard places and be vulnerable yourself, like, you still won't learn. So when I think, hey, can I help this person? I'm really asking the person, like, are you willing to learn from me?
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition,
that's important too. Not only are they willing to learn, but are they willing to learn from the person?
Correct.
Right?
Are you willing to learn? Period. A question mark. Yes. Are you willing to learn from me?
Yes. Question
mark. And then, are you willing to do the hard work to learn for you, and not just for somebody else? And so that's why when I am seeking to was just talking to my staff about this today. I am seeking to step back from my help language, my help thought, my, hey, I can do something about that. I'm learning to scale that back and go, hey, what can I control? What can I change? What's mine to own? Well, what I control is my responses. I can control my questions. I can control my expectations, my level of vulnerability. Can't control theirs. What can I change? I can change my responses. I can change my level of care. I can change my level of involvement. What can I own? I can own when I don't do any of that. Or when I do that, I can own, hey, I've done that. And now I am, for lack of a better way to put it, released from the burden of thinking I have to do that. So now it's, hey, if you have opportunity with all that lies in you, give everything you possibly can. But don't force that as if having the expectation that when you do this, they will respond in this way. I call it, it's the antithesis of the rejection objection. But when Moses is talking to God, he gives 3 objections. The first one is the rejection objection. What if I go to them and they don't listen to me? And I thought that for most of my life. Like, what if I go and I tell them and they don't listen to me? Well, that's focused on the response and not the responsibility. Now, what I'm learning now is instead of focusing on the response, what they might say, focus on the responsibility. Like, you need to be healthy. I could never say this growing up. I can say this. I deserve to be healthy. I deserve to be heard. I deserve to be understood. I deserve to be considered. Not because I'm special, but because God created me for relationship. And so I'm worth that. And every human being is. And so for most of my life, I couldn't even say that because I thought it was prideful and selfish and arrogant. Whereas now I'm going, no, I think to not see my value the way that God sees my value is more selfish and arrogant because he thinks I'm worth it. And he thought I was worth it enough to kill his son. Not because of me, but because I'm his creation and his prized possession. I'm his masterpiece and artwork. And so that being the case, that's why I'm more willing now to step back and say, hey, maybe I can't help, but what's my responsibility? My responsibility is for me to be healthy and model that health that I'm expecting out of other people.
Yeah, that's dope. I know in the Kaleo Say So, I talked about in the session we did. It was had to be Thursday, but the session we did on Are You Necessary?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, and I did say it and say so, but that one changed my life because when I did my trial sermon in 2003, there was a pastor said, "Man, that was good." He said, and in the message I preached from Matthew 5, I said, "I'm in the that God needs you," And he came to me afterward. He said, "But I want you to remember that God doesn't need us." Now, I know what he meant.
Yep.
But for those 16 years, I've just been thinking, like, God doesn't need me. Like, God could use anybody. So when the questions was asked, I was like, well, that thing is hard for me to answer.
Oh, yeah.
I said, because I don't feel like he needs me. And at the same time, I was telling the Holy Spirit was like, why'd I make you? And then Alice says, well, he created you. And I'm like, oh, yeah, oh, snap. But it just radically changed my life.
Yeah.
Because the last 2 mornings I woke up and said, I am necessary.
Yep.
And I exist too. And I know what my purpose is.
Yep.
And that, so kind of like what you was just saying, it just resonates with me too, because that's something I think I caught from the upbringing. And when somebody reiterated it at that time, I just felt like, oh, this has to be true.
Right.
Because I kind of felt like that anyway, But, and then I was telling my dad too. He was like, well, when you was preaching, you probably meant like, yeah, he needs you to share the gospel. I'm saying, yeah, but when that dude said that, I'm just thinking, yeah, he don't need me.
Right.
And that, to me, you're thinking, what the reason I'm telling the story is because what you just said about it just becoming arrogance and not humility.
Right.
But when you first think about it, you think it's humble to
Right.
think that way. But when you really think about it, it is prideful.
Right.
It is arrogant to think that way. But I'm like, I wasn't even trying to think that way. Somebody else pressed that thinking upon me.
Correct.
And I accepted it, wore it. So that's what this week did for me. It was dope, man, that now I can go back to Maryland. And I know a bunch of those people, the fact is, they told me it's crazy. A bunch of those people say, no, we need you. And I just always be like, no, you don't need me. You know? But now I can go and say, I am necessary.
Yep.
And help them because they probably caught, from me,
I'm not necessary.
A lot of that.
Right. Yeah. And I tell the staff here, definitions is so important. I used to say the same thing. Used to believe the same thing. And I remember when the Lord qualified for me. God does not need us, but the definition is required. He doesn't require us. And you've probably heard me say this preaching. God doesn't need you. There's nothing that He can't do without you except one thing. Without He can't have a relationship with you if you don't exist.
Right.
So He does need you to have a relationship with you. Like that can't exist without you.
Yeah.
And so understanding that is like, no, I am necessary. I'm not saying I'm required for God to be God.
Right.
But I am
to
required
go a certain way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am needed for Him to have a relationship. Yeah. And so He has put me where He puts me because He wants me to be there. And in that sense, He needs me to be there. That's why Paul said, and again, some of it is like just not, and I'm the same way. Just as I read through the scriptures, I was telling my staff this the other day, telling them on this the other day, like, you just read scriptures like Paul says, it's more needful for me to be here for you.
Yeah.
And reading that is going, well, Paul didn't really mean it was more needful. I mean, God don't really need. But he
says
needful.
That's it.
Right under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So it's not selfish or arrogant or mean or wrong. It's just, I think sometimes I try so hard to stay away from pride.
Yeah, me too. That we end up doing something that's
prideful.
Exactly right.
I'm telling people, and because the Lord has released me to be on Facebook for the first time, and so September I'm getting on Facebook.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I was scared to get on Facebook. / my fear was, man, Lord, I don't want to mess around and see something on Facebook that I shouldn't see. I mean, I know my history with pornography. I know my history with just people. Like, I'm just not trying to become that guy living for the like. I'm not trying to figure out how many people follow. I don't want none of that.
Right.
None of it, because I don't want to detract me from you. And bro, what he said to me rocked my world. He said, if you are staying holy or pure because you're staying away from Facebook, it sounds like you don't need me for holiness or purity anyway. So then I was like, I need to get on Instagram. I need to be all in. I want to be on the stream. But the reality is, he just communicated what I thought was so dope. It was, Timotheus, I'm the one who keeps you pure. Not you and not your decisions.
Same thing He's communicated through you to others.
Yeah.
100 times.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get it, bro. Well, I love you.
Hey, I love you too.
And this is dope.
I love it.
I know you a little bit better now.
Yeah. And
we share a lot of common experiences.
Yes, sir.
And I'm rooting for you. Because I should die before you do.
That's funny. It all depends on what Muslim place I get to preach in.
Oh, that's true.
No,
that's real.
I am who I am today a lot because of what you have taught me. So never forget that. It has been such a joy to be able to do ministry with you in different places. I always wrestle with how to do that in a way that is honoring, but then also in a way that is supportive. And that's only because, the inside of me is like, no, I want to prove to him I'm a leader. But then you've communicated I'm a leader. So then it's like, well, now
10 years ago, how long ago that was now?
Now he knows I'm a leader.
Yeah.
So now what do I do?
Lead.
He leading, so I'm taking a back seat and legal support. And so I told Dominique and the man when we were on the boat fishing, and this is the stuff that people just don't know about me because they don't pay attention when I'm not in a leadership position. When I go speak at a conference, when we was on that boat, I got 3 other incredibly strong leaders on that boat. I am content to not lead. And in the house I grew up in, everybody was a strong leader and a strong personality. Even Titus, who wasn't as vocal, still, I mean, his leadership just speaks for itself. And so I was always content to follow, but was always thrust to leadership. So it's like, why am I thrust to leadership when all these people, they can do anything? And so that is what has been by far the most influential in my life. Understanding with all of the leaders that are around me, God still chose me to lead. And so I'm reading through Exodus right now, man, and what has been such a blessing to me is the text says about Moses that he keeps going back to the I'm slow of speech, you chose the wrong guy. And then the text goes through the genealogy, and it seems random. it's either chapter 7 or chapter 8, somewhere in that. It seems random, but the text says 3 times in the CSB, this was the Moses and Aaron that God chose. This was the Moses that stood before Pharaoh. And it's just like, man, I wonder if some of that was the Holy Spirit communicating to people, hey, this is who I chose. Like, bump his ability. This is who I chose. And so it means so much to me because for so long, I really did try to be that leader and failed miserably. And so at the point that I had failed miserably, to the point where I didn't want to start, I didn't want to keep trying. That was the very point where God was like,
"Yeah, you ready?
Yeah, man, you're seeking something that you already got, so you're wasting your time." And so that's when I saw the most fruit leadership-wise. But anyway,
I know that's true. Well, I know from this year forward, I definitely plan to really sink into your ministry. Yeah. So what that means is like that vision over there, man. I love the. I mean, we relaunched our church anyway. We started it over.
Yeah.
We canceled every ministry. We started over. We like a group of people that's on the property, and we're just going to worship God. So, as a result,
awesome.
That's what we did. So as a result of all that, youth ministry is not a part of the church. It's a separate program. It's like our parachurch organization. But so is SB2Dub. So that's gonna be part of our ministry.
Okay.
And we're gonna get, like today we told Myra, we're gonna identify the kids that actually want to return. I'm actually gonna tell them, if you don't want to come back next year, you won't come back. Like, unless God does something, because we want you to come back in that 5-year rotation.
Yep.
We want to build up leaders from here.
Yeah.
And send them back to change our city. Your vision.
Yep.
We want to take your vision, and we actually are going to live it out. Yeah. Like, we're going to do that and bring them here to be trained, and we're going to be training them there to come here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So what I'm hoping is when they get here, they're not like, oh, they're hyped. They want to win the awards until they can't.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? They want to press their way through, and then hopefully that will set a precedent for the rest of our youth in our community, in our city. And maybe our city be one of those first cities that we can put on the SB2Dub. This is what changed our lives.
Absolutely.
Just get more people coming.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be more intentional in this ministry than we have been.
That's great. Yeah. Then we get this.
We always support it, but now it's part of us.
That vision.
Yeah, it's part of the vision of growing up leaders in our church.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm also encouraging Kaleos to do the same. We had a talk, and I was like, look, that's the vision. It's right.
Let's
do it.